let us start this amazing, may I say, historical session about the recently found Mount Ebal inscription. I want to start out by first saying that my wife, my dear wife Esther, who I really appreciate, said, Aaron, everybody knows already about Joshua's altar. They heard you many times, so make it short and let the important people talk. So I'm I'm going to follow my wife's advice, and I'm going to just say some really just a very short presentation, because I would really want Professor Peter to be able to present his thoughts and comments about the recently discovered inscription. So let's first start with the fact that I am really happy with this discovery, but I'm also very sad that Professor Adam Zartal is not alive today with us to witness this amazing discovery, the implications of this discovery, not just to his discovery of the altar on Mount Ebal, but also the repercussions of this to the study of Bible, the study of archaeology, the study of anthropology, of ancient history, of the history of the area of the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. This is truly an amazing time that we're living in, and Professor Zertal is not with us. And I see myself as even though I'm not an archaeologist, I see myself as a disciple of Adam Zertal. Adam Zertal, as you all know, was born and raised in Israel in Kibbutz Ein Shemel. He was wounded in the Yom Kippur War during his army service in 1973. And later on, he decided to become an archaeologist, even though he was wounded badly by that war. And you can see his picture on the wheelchair at the hospital in 1973. And Zertal later on insisted that he wanted to be an archaeologist, and he definitely went on and did it. And with his crutches, he roamed the land of Israel. I remember our last phone call, just a few months before he passed away. Zertal asked me to help him, to help the Manasseh Hill Country Survey um, publicize their discoveries and try to promote their understanding of uh, ancient Israel and the history and the way that the history appears both in archaeology but also in the Bible. And so I said to Zerta, I'm going to do it, and I'm doing it, and I will continue doing it. And I'm really happy that this discovery of the inscription is something that I was part of, really part of making history with all my colleagues and friends. Let's talk about the discovery of the altar on Mount Ebal. So just to get an idea of the area we're talking about, we can see the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea. We can see the Tirzah Valley, that is the ancient road leading from the Jordan Valley to the heartland of Samaria, where the city of Shechem was. We can see that the city of Shechem is located in a valley between two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Here is another short video of the place, the exact place that we're talking about. So we're zooming in to the area of Judea and Samaria, and continue on zooming to the area of Samaria that we are talking about, the area of the city, the modern city, Arab city of Nablus of today. Nablus is actually a Roman city, and the ancient city of Shechem, biblical Shechem, is actually in the valley in this area right here, not to be confused with Nablus, the Roman city in the valley. You can see that Mount Ebal is exactly to our right, and this is the army base located on the top of the summit of Mount Ebal. This is a biblical map. You can see that according to the biblical map, the area we're talking about, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, are exactly on the border between the tribes of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh, the two sons of Joseph, who is buried in Shechem in the middle between these two tribes. Here is a flyby of the area of Shechem, and you can see, one second. Well, you can see a picture of Mount Gerizim on the left, Mount Ebal on the right, and the city of Nablus, the suburbs of Nablus. And here, smack in the middle, is ancient Shechem, the tell of Shechem. And so for centuries, archaeologists in the late 19th century and early 20th century looked for the altar on an altar on Mount Ebal on the southern slopes of the mountain, and they couldn't find any evidence of such an altar. The idea was that the tribes stood on these two summits, these two slopes, and the priests stood here. And this was the natural amphitheater of where the ceremony that is described in Joshua 8 and in Deuteronomy 27 is where the ceremony happened. I'm going to, with your permission, I'm going to skip the verses at the moment. I do want to share with you a marvelous drone video that I took of the structure on Mount Ebal, the altar on Mount Ebal, and you can see how amazing it is and how detailed it is. And what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes is just to browse through the things that Professor Zartal found in relation to this structure and his conclusion of what it was and how it's related to the Bible. So first of all, a short background. The area of the Jordan Valley and Samaria is an area that unfortunately was not surveyed systematically prior to 1978. We're talking about a black stain on the archeological map of Israel. And that is exactly the area that the Bible describes as the center of the activity of the Israelite tribes in the beginning. And so what happened was that after 1967, after Israel liberated the biblical heartland of Israel, the area opened up for archeological research. And so the Manasseh Hill Country Survey was responsible for the archeological surveying of the Jordan Valley and the area of the tribe of Manasseh. Professor Israel Finkelstein was given the area of Ephraim to the south of the area that Zartal surveyed. And because our interest is in the Israelite period or the Iron Age period, I'm just going to mention the three interesting discoveries that the Manasseh survey was able to find in the 40 years of their survey that is still being conducted even today. Just 2 weeks ago, we started surveying the Kabir Ridge, which is right opposite Mount Ebal, to the east of it. And so it's ongoing, and we're really looking forward to finding more and more interesting discoveries during this current survey. But this is still ongoing, and during the 40 years that this survey has been underway, there were a couple of really fascinating facts that were found that need to be mentioned as a background to the discovery of the altar on Mount Ebal. First and foremost is the interesting change between the late Bronze Age. To our right, what we see is a map of the Jordan Valley. This is the area of the Tirzah Valley going into Shechem. That's the ancient road that I showed you earlier. The Bible calls it the way of the setting down of the sun. And this is the ancient way that goes into Shechem, the Tirzah Valley, or in Arabic, the Farah Valley. And what we see to our right is a survey map of the late Bronze Age settlements that were in the Jordan Valley. When I'm saying late Bronze, I'm talking about roughly the period between 1500 and 1200 BC. If we're talking about biblical chronology, depending on who you're asking, we're talking about the time of the Israelites in Egypt and the Exodus and wandering in the desert. And so what we see to our right is a very interesting picture, a picture where the area of the Jordan Valley that we're seeing here is empty. There are only a couple of communities in the area of Beit She'an, but already here, virtually no settlements, no human dwellings in this area at all. As we move to the Iron Age period, which is around the year 1250 to 1000, we see a very sharp rise in the number of settlements in this area. And this is one of the discoveries of the Manasseh Hill Country Survey, the understanding that somehow there is a influx or possibly an invasion of a semi-nomadic culture into the area of the Jordan Valley around the time, around the late Bronze, early Iron Age period. And this coincides with the description in the Bible that talks about an Israelite invasion into the land of Israel. How do these dwellings look like? This is another picture of another area in the Jordan Valley, again, late Bronze to your right and early Iron Age to your left. A very sharp rise of hundreds of percents in the number of dwellings in the early Iron Age period. And so there's clearly some invasion that's happening here, that there is a lot of people that are living in this area. How do these dwellings look like? They look like this. This is a picture of sheep pens that very clearly show that the inhabitants of the ones that build these structures were semi-nomadic. What we're seeing are the sheep pens, and we can imagine that around these sheep pens, these circular monuments, you had tents, sort of like Bedouin tents that were built around this sheep pen and were protecting the sheep and the goats inside. Another interesting discovery that the Manasseh survey made, again, in relation to the time of the late Bronze and early Iron Age period, is the oval-shaped footprint structures or sandal-shaped structures that Zartal found in the Jordan Valley and Samaria. This is another topic that we can talk about for an hour, but the interesting thing about these compounds, these oval-shaped structures, is they're big sized, very different from the sheep pens that we just saw. They have a couple of attributes that repeat themselves. A temenus, a compound wall that doesn't serve any other than just marking the border between one area and the other. They have inner divisions. They have some of them have a procession road. You can see here in Argaman a procession road around the heel of this foot structure, another procession wall around the Yafit footprint structure, and another attribute that repeats itself is a natural amphitheater that borders or in the vicinity of the compound, which allows hundreds, sometimes thousands of people to sit and watch what is going on inside the footprint structure. Zartal theorized that these structures are the Gilgal that is mentioned in the Bible. Gilgal is the ancient Israelite worshiping sites, and he actually proved his theory when he found the footprint structure of Rimonim, according to the biblical site near Ma'ale Adumim that is mentioned on the border between Judah and Benjamin in the book of Joshua. And so we found, just to summarize, discovery of, I would say, civilian places of dwellings, where people would live, and also a worshiping, or as we say in archaeology, a cultic site that was used for spiritual reasons. And so this is important. And an interesting thing, that something that is that Dr. Ralph Hawkins mentions in his book, the Iron Age 1 structure on Mount Ebal and the beginning of Israel, is the fact that many of these sites that are not just in the Jordan Valley but also in Samaria are built on bedrock. And so, many people are asking, how do you know they're Israelite? Well, many of them actually continued on into the time of the Northern Kingdom in the Iron Age 2 period, which most scholars agree were already Israelite or part of the Israelite kingdom, or the kingdom of Israel, the Northern Kingdom. And so there is a continuation from the time of of Joshua and the Judges on to the times of Samuel 2 and the Kings, without any disruption between those two periods. And so there is that is in itself a clear identification of these sites as being Israelite. And other ways of distinction between Israelite and non-Israelite sites is the assemblage of bones that were found in those areas, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Adam Zartal arrives at Mount Ebal in 1980, surveying the slopes of Mount Ebal, and really clearly not looking for the altar of Joshua or any altar for that sense. Zartal just wanted to survey the mountain like he surveyed other areas of Samaria. And as he was surveying the northeastern slopes of Mount Ebal, he encountered an area that was, again, very reminiscent of the other sandal or foot structures that he found in the Jordan Valley and Samaria, an area that was, again, defined by an exterior wall and was adjacent to a slope of a mountain that could have served as an amphitheater. There are inner divisions inside, and a possible high ground, a possible spiritual place of sacrifice that could have been there at the highest place, but that was only a theory at that time. Zartal really wanted to come back, and he did that, and he came to excavate it in 1982. This is an aerial of the reconstruction of the footprint structure around Mount Ebal, and the wall was reconstructed by Adam Zartal above the ancient wall that we just saw in the picture. Right here is one of our groups visiting the site, so we can actually see the size, the really big size of this temenos, this compound wall that really doesn't correlate with the geography. It has a certain shape for a certain reason, very similar to the other oval-shaped structures in Argaman, Yafit, Rimonim, and the rest. Here is a sketch of the compound. I just want to talk about a few things. First of all, we can see the outer compound wall. that is defining the area. There is an inner division with a staircase leading up to another inner area. And again, you can see that the wall, the ancient wall, doesn't correspond with the elevation or the geography or the topography of the site. And therefore, the people that invested energy in building this wall, it was important for them to build it in a certain shape, sometimes contrary to the geography or the topography. On the top, on the highest place of this compound, was a very thick layer of stone, a pile of stone called El Burnat. And Zartal in 1982 started excavating, or rather, if I would like to say, peeling off, and we're going to understand that in a minute, peeling off this layer of stones and revealing a structure under it. This structure was really at first mysterious. Zartal did not understand what this structure is, and we're seeing the structure before the any attempt of reconstruction or completion, and so we can see that there is some sort of a ramp going up and a rectangular shaped high ground with two courts around the ramp. Well, let's take another look. This is a sketch of what Zartal found. I want to concentrate on a couple of things. First of all, there is a main ramp going up, a secondary ramp on both sides of the main ramp, a rectangular high place that was sealed, and on the sides and also in the courts, we can see these round installations. These round installations are very clearly for cultic reasons, for spiritual reasons. These are places where you would put offerings. And this is something that is one of the things that I would say is in consensus about this site. When we ask if this is a cultic site, a spiritual site, then these installations are clearly a symbol of this place being of a spiritual or as we say in archaeology, cultic use. One of the main things that Zartal did was to excavate the area that was the high ground. In other words, if we look here, this area here, the rectangular area, Zartal wanted to excavate inside and see what's inside. And this structure is all made out of field stones. None of these stones were worked on or cut in order to be shaped in a certain way. They are all field stones. The excavation went on, and what Zartal discovered was amazing. Inside this box, I would call it, this rectangular box, he found layers of ashes and bones that were sent to be analyzed in a university in Israel. And the results were astounding. They were all belonging to animals that, according to the Bible, are pure animals. This is a clear sign that the site is an Israelite site. There were no pig bones, horse bones, donkey bones, only bones of young, male, pure animals according to the Bible. Most of the bones that were found there were actually from the right side of the animal, which really corresponds with the Levitical, the commandments in Leviticus about sacrificing the sacrifices. I'm not going to go into all the details about these bones, but the bones and the ashes are an important component in understanding what was used, how this structure was used. It's important to state that in the center of this rectangular altar right here, or let's move, you see the center of this structure right here was excavated all the way down to the bedrock. And down at the bedrock was another interesting surprise, and that is a circular installation of some sort right in the center of the larger structure. And when Zartal is describing the layers or the history, so to say, of this site, he's talking about this structure, this installation being the first thing to be built. And only after this is built, the larger structure is built. In other words, this is the first layer of the site. This is the second layer of the site. And then on top of this structure, a layer of stones was erected in order to basically take this out of commission, to stop the action and to somehow respectfully bury the site under stones. And so we basically have three layers: the outer layer of stones that covered the bigger structure, the structure itself, and then inside a round structure that was inside and it was in the middle of this square. And these walls that you see here are also part of the ancient structure that stood here prior to the bigger structure. And this structure actually is of great importance for all of us. And when Zartal found it, he actually called it the founding altar, or the founding structure that would later on sanctify this area for the bigger structure. And we're going to learn more about this inner circular altar or structure later on. Inside, this is a picture of the circular altar that was found in the middle. You can see the stones that are making the circle, and this is a very, very exciting picture, I believe. Let's continue on. Other things that were found in the altar, actually this was found inside the circular altar, is this pumice chalice, which was used for ceremonial purposes, probably incense. And this is another pumice like this was found actually in the Sinai. And so this is an interesting connection between our site in Samaria on Mount Ebal and the Sinai and the ceremonies that were taking place there. Other things that were found is plaster. Large pieces of plaster were found at the altar, many of them inside the circular altar that we saw in the middle. Some of them actually already still carry the outer layer of the plaster. Why is this interesting? We will discuss that in a later time. Obviously, a lot of pottery sherds, special pottery vessels that were found only in certain locations like Shiloh and Ebal. These are markings on the handles that also, again, were found only in certain places like Shiloh and the oval-shaped structure of Unuk in the Tirzah Valley. Zartal believed that these markings are cultic or spiritual in nature. They are markings of tithing of some sort that the Israelites used when they had vessels that had wine or other types of offerings. Jewelry was also found near the altar, also scarabs and dye. These are very interesting because they really help us. The scarabs help us date the site, and dating is one of the, I would say, the biggest discussions about the site on Mount Ebal. Which time is it from? How does that coincide with the traditions of the Exodus, the biblical chronology? As many of you know, there is a discussion amongst the archaeologists that do believe that this site has some sort of a connection to the story of Joshua's altar in the Bible. Was the Exodus around the beginning of the 13th century, or is it 100 or 50 years earlier than that, around the year 1450? There is a big discussion, and these scarabs that you see in front of you are part of that debate. At the time that Zartal found them, they were dated to the time of Ramses II. A recent scholar called Daphna Bento, an Egyptologist, actually dated the Ramses II scarabs that were found to an earlier period of Pharaoh Thutmose III. So that actually coincides with those that support the early Exodus date. We're not going to go into that, but this is something that I think Scott might mention later on. And so what is this structure, and can we find any parallels to it? And this is something that Zartal describes in his book, A Nation Born. There's a certain moment where he's sitting, trying to understand what the structure is, not finding any parallels anywhere in the ancient world, how or who built this and for what purpose, and discovering that this looks very similar to the Second Temple period altar in Jerusalem. Again, a ramp, a secondary ramp, and a rectangular shaped high ground. This is very, very similar to what he found. And when he saw the picture of this structure of the Second Temple altar, main altar, this is the moment that Zartal understood that what he excavated is an Israelite altar, and the difference, the length between that and connecting it to the tradition in the Bible of the ceremony of the blessings and the curses on Mount Ebal and Joshua was very, very short, and Zartal truly believed that what he found is Joshua's altar, an Israelite altar that was built on Mount Ebal as part of the ceremony of the blessings and the curses. Here is another sketch of the Second Temple altar, and this is the conclusion. A highly important altar that was discovered on Mount Ebal proves the credibility of the beginning of Israel according to the Deuteronomy and Joshua. The minimalist school, denying the history of the Bible, the historicity of the Bible, has never reacted to the new facts. And the response of the maximalist school here is also interesting. I just want to concentrate on the first sentence. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I would say the mainstream view was that the Bible, especially the early books of Genesis to, I would say, Samuel 2, even Kings 1, were written in much later periods, that the Israelites were not able to read and write during the time of Joshua, the 13th century BC, that the Israelites did not worship the Lord, and that they were actually Canaanites. So different theories. They were all, I would say, derived from the fact that there was absence of evidence to the historical stories that are mentioned in the book of Joshua, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and on. And I would like to just go to the third clause, which says, just because you, sorry, the second one, just because you haven't found something doesn't mean that it didn't happen. The fact we didn't find proof of Israelite existence in Egyptian records doesn't mean they weren't there. And it just means we didn't find it. We will never find evidence for every single event that happened in the Bible, but we do have a lot of evidence for many events. And the reason why we're doing this conference right now, this Zoom conference, is because sometimes the evidence does show up. And we're going to talk about that. Professor Steger from the Harvard University said, if there is an altar on Mount Ebal, as Zartal claims, we biblical scholars should all go back to kindergarten. And I have a feeling that the kindergartens in Israel will start to open up for many, many professors in the next few weeks. So stay tuned. I just want to point out that we are publishing the books of Adam Zartal about the altar and nation born, as well as the footsteps of God, which talks about the footprint structures, and they are available on our website. So if you are interested in reading more from Zartal's description, then you are more than invited to purchase the books online. This is the reason why we're here. Scott Stripling and I decided that we had to do something about Joshua's altar, that this is such an important site, historically, biblically, archeologically, and this site must be researched. And, since 1989, the last year of excavations of Adam Zartal, this site was not researched. And so it's time to move on. It's time to continue the research, the archaeological research of Samaria. And Scott and I together, along with other colleagues, brought the archaeological dump of Professor Zartal from the late 1980s to Shavei Shomron, the town of Shavei Shomron. This was done with the great help of the mayor of Samaria, Yossi Dagan, and the army. And we are very thankful to all the people that were part of this project. And the list is so long, and unfortunately, we don't have time. And I want to let Professor Peter give us the next stage of this session. These are just pictures of the wet sifting, and you can see the wet sifting stations. You can see Scott and Abigail sorting the pottery sherds, the Lipkin tours staff going through some of the materials, and the Israeli army coming and seeing the amazing discoveries that were done, and so on and so forth. And Professor Peter, this is the time for you to share amazing news with us.
Yes, very good.